Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Site Midwest webinar series. We want to thank you for joining us and welcome you to part one of the U.S. Open Forum educational webinar series. This happens to be the What series. This webinar is designed to cover the changes that have occurred in the incentive industry and what we can do to adapt. So, before I introduce our distinguished panel, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the SMART Forum. Be a part of the inaugural Site Midwest Adapting, Responding, Transforming Forum, a four-day event where buyers and suppliers can come together to learn and share their ideas, experience, and educate one another. For more information on this event, or if you're interested in sponsoring an upcoming event from the Midwest USA chapter, please check out our chapter website, sitemidwestusa.com, to see our 2019 calendar, and then contact our Vice President of Sponsorship, Linda Schweitz, for more information. I'm Jim Adams. I'm the founder and Chief Rules Officer of Performance Strategies, and today I'll be your moderator. Joining us today on our distinguished panel, we have Wayne Walgren, CIS, Director of Global Development and Global Services. We also have Gary Cornwell, who's the President of Galactic Marketing. I'm going to read from their bios, and I think you'll be very impressed with the folks you're going to hear from their experience and what they've done. Wayne Walgren is, with many of us in this industry, they found their ultimate career in an unorthodox fashion. He didn't set out on the path that ended up, but he's glad that he did. Wayne attended the University of Oklahoma on a track scholarship and ultimately participated in the 1980 U.S. Olympic trials as part of an exclusive group of 176 marathon runners that met the standards set to qualify for the top trials. Things didn't go as planned on race day, but the focus and personal effort that got him that far remained part of his ethos and works towards other goals. His initial exposure to the incentive travel came when a client of his advertising and marketing company asked him to handle the details for a cruise his client was taking his 300 best customers on. Worldwide incentives was then formed. Fast forward to 2019, and WTI is a distant memory. In late 2018, Wayne sold it to Global Service and joined as the Director of Global Development, applying the same guiding principles, an intense focus on the desired result and the path to get there, coupled along with an acute attention to detail and the necessary changes along the way to ensure a satisfactory result in the development and execution of meetings and incentive programs for a broad range of clients. His love for the industry has translated to 17 years as a member of SITE, 7 years of which were spent on the SITE Texas Board of Directors, including a year as chapter president. He's just returned to the chapter board for a second round. His signature quote is, "The world's a book, and those who don't travel read only a page," St. Augustine. His signature picture is a picture of his lovely wife, Michelle, with a glass of wine at one of the many dozens, hundreds, thousands of places where they've not only had wine but traveled. We all recognize her from her picture. Next, I'd like to introduce Gary Cornwell. I've known Gary personally for close to 15, 16 years now, and he's an amazing individual. He joined Galactic Marketing back in 2000, and during his tenure with the company, he's been instrumental in development of their advanced technical platforms and data analysis process, all while maintaining focus on the people-first approach to doing business. And I can tell you, when Gary talks about people first, he means it. This helped establish Galactic as one of the industry's top performance improvement companies. He's a U.S. Army veteran and an avid outdoorsman and a motorcycle enthusiast. He earned his degree in computer services from the University of Oklahoma. He also holds multiple certifications in all of the technical application field. His lovely wife, Nancy, who also works with him at Galactic, that in its sense is a marvelous tribute to both of them, have 3 children. They reside in Euless, Texas. And Gary finds himself now as one of the owners, starting from an IT background, working his way up. He's had sales jobs. He's had distribution jobs. He's literally done it all from the bootstraps up, and now he's an owner and a president of the company. So these 2 gentlemen are going to be able to answer the questions that we've got coming. And Wayne and Gary, on behalf of Site Midwest and our board, I want to welcome you both. And I want to thank you for your time and your dedication to our local chapter.
Thank you.
All right.
I'm happy to do it.
Can you both hear me?
I can hear you.
Thank you. Can you hear us?
Yes, we hear you great. So now we're going to talk about rule structure. We're going to talk about rule structure. And we're going to talk about how things have changed since the 3 of us started in the industry. And to me, the reason we're starting with rule structure is that's probably the biggest change that we've seen. And I understand we have a technical difficulty in the screen. Okay, but we're getting that worked on. So the rule structure, we used to always go into a program and create a way to track progress and then focus on driving certain results. Gary, where did you first realize how important the rule structure development could be to earning clients and maintaining clients?
Well, this was, for me, it was way back when my career started in this industry, and was exposed to a client that kind of had a rule structure set in their mind, and they were looking at us back then. They needed to flesh something out, but they also wanted to find a great way to fulfill the carrot on the other end. And as you mentioned earlier, Jim, I have a military background, and I asked a question in that meeting, and I said, look, I've got the advantage of being the dumbest guy in the platoon. That's exactly the way I put it. I said, I don't know your day-to-day operations the way you do, but allowing me to ask certain questions, and why do you do this way, and what is it that you're trying to ultimately accomplish, enable us to help them set up a rule structure that actually dramatically increased their ROI compared to what they had done previously. And a light bulb kind of went off in my mind, especially having a technical background as well, that this is the side of the business that really excites me. Everybody thinks that the destinations are sexy and they're great, and if it's a loyalty platform or a points platform, it's the items that the participant achieves by performing that are fantastic, and that's great. All that's wonderful. But it's really increasing that bottom line profit to the company that really endeared me to this industry. And that's the reason that I chose to make the final part of my career here, because I could see the value in it.
Great. Thanks, Gary. Wayne, what about you?
Well, I pretty much agree 100% with what Gary was saying. The exception on my end would be the part that's always appealed to me is actual delivery of the award, because seeing their reactions when they're there and having them experience something in a way that we've helped put together, to me, that's the part that helps make it special. But, you know, for the client, a lot of times they don't understand. They've got a problem and they don't really understand that they have a problem, and that's why we're there to help them resolve something that they don't even recognize is a lot of the way I look at it. And so to be able to come in and help them figure out a way to increase sales, reward their folks, and do it from a certain value proposition. All those things together, I think, really make what we do special, and it helps us, make people happy, and that's, at the end of the day, that's part of the fun.
And Gary, I know that when you started your company, you were thrust into starting a company to provide service for a client that needed your help, and fulfillment was the first thing you were asked to do. How did you reach out and learn things like rule structures to benefit your client that far back? What resource did you use to educate yourself?
Well, we actually went out and we hired a couple of people that were focused solely on role structure development. That was their entire job within our organization at the time. And looking at that and trying to, I personally would apply the business model of the technical model of building a program and start with the end in mind and back up. And so learning from those people who had done it prior to me being in the industry, and trying to do my best to add a new type of a technical spin on it, or something that kind of looked outside the box of the way that they had done it in the past. I mean, we were fortunate enough at the time to have some people that were involved way back when, S&H Green Camps was starting to be set up and things like that. So we focused very, very heavily on rule structure, especially back then. We still do now, but back then we were asked for it. We were viewed more as the experts back then than I think that our industry is necessarily viewed as now. In the past, we were the experts, and today it seems like the internet or the crowdsourcing information might be viewed as the expert.
Yeah, I really agree, Gary. Wayne, you started as a one-man band and turned yourself into an expert. How did you do that?
Well, in a lot of ways, not that different from what Gary was doing, but I didn't have the benefit of access to experts, and so a lot of what we were doing was starting at what we wanted the result to be and working backwards, just as Gary was saying. But then also, a lot of the clients they thought they had their process in place, and so some would let us have a peek behind the curtain, some would not. But as time went on, in the course of conversations, we were able to help them refine what they were doing and create a better process. In their minds, that's not what they came to us for. They came to us for the fulfillment aspect of it. But again, when you go back to helping them identify a problem they don't even know they have, that's a lot of where we were able to provide a service and help them do a better job internally, and then the external reward was something that they were happier with. So,
yeah, and to add to what Wayne just said, I mean, in a roundabout way, you can't be afraid to ask questions.
no,
If somebody comes to you and they think that they know what it is that they're looking for, you can't be afraid to ask questions, because ultimately the success of their solution equals the success of our time together. And so if we can't kind of come up to the table and not be afraid to ask those questions, it's not going to perform at the level that it could. So
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and so as with many things, I mean, the challenge with the client is it's the old, they don't know what they don't know. And a lot of times we find out how much they know or how much they don't know via the questions, which, fortunately for me, playing dumb is something I'm pretty good at because I practice all the time. And so to ask a seemingly innocent question, hoping to, get a response, because that response is going to help lead you down a better path, or will tell you that they really don't know. And that's where an opportunity can lie.
Right.
So, fellas, have you ever lost a piece of business because you asked a question? I know I have.
Oh gosh, I don't know if I lost a piece of business because I asked the question, but certainly there are those opportunities where, in spite of everything you do, you might lose a piece of business, and sometimes you may not realize it at the time, but it was one of the best things that happened to you that day.
Yep, I agree with that completely. Yeah, I don't know if I've ever lost a piece of business because of a question, but I probably have lost business. I know I've lost business by not agreeing with the direction somebody wants to go on something. And when I was younger, every piece of business was a good piece of business.
Yeah.
As I've gotten older, I've realized that, if I see that a program is destined to either underperform or to fail, I won't put my people through that. They've got time, effort, energy, and heart and soul in it. And if it's not going to perform, and we're not going to make money on it, or it's not going to continue on, that's not something we're interested in anyway.
Yeah, no, that's very, very true, and it's a hard thing. Gosh, you see it sitting there, and the visions of the check moving to the bank, are dancing in your head, but reality doesn't always bear that out.
Right.
And it's the real awakening is when you recognize that perhaps this isn't the opportunity for you, and only then do you act in what would truly be the appropriate fashion.
And for those of you who are young in the industry, I meant what I said. I've lost plenty of business by asking questions, because sometimes we ask a question about a rule structure that's just kind of ridiculous, and the person that wrote it's in a room and we don't know who they are.
Right.
And they use it politically. The other people in that room, they didn't particularly like that person. No matter how politely you ask the question, they can use it against that person. But on the other hand, it feeds back to what Gary and Wayne were just saying. That probably wouldn't have been a good fit anyway, because that person's going to fight it the whole way. And for every piece you lose, you pick up about 100. So math-wise, I think full service is on our side. By the way, listeners, if you have a question, please use the chat function on your WebEx toolbar, and we'll make sure that Wayne and Gary get a chance to answer it. Fellas, full service. You both come from full service backgrounds. You build a program, you make adjustments as needed, you fulfill rewards. I remember way back when I first started at Marathon, we used to have a saying, client comes to buy one thing, you sell them another, you deliver another, and off to the races you go. Because things were so changeable and things move so quickly. Do you find that in today's climate that's still happening, or once you've started a program, are people pretty much hands-off about making changes or making adjustments that goes along?
I'll jump in first here. I think the desire to change something as you're moving along, I don't think that's ever going to go away, because there are those that up until the moment you walk in the door to property, in their mind, you still have the ability to change things. And, as best we can, we're certainly happy to accommodate when it makes sense. And sometimes you have to have the conversation about perhaps it's not the best idea. And my thing with the client is to make sure they understand the upside and the downside of everything we're going to do. And because if I don't do that, then they don't have the ability to make an informed decision. If it's all happy talk and it's all going to be great, well, that can bite you in the ass, and I just really hate it when that happens. So, yeah. But I think they're always going to want to try and it's just the nature of the beast to want to have a look and try and move things in some fashion.
Change is inevitable, on site and before site when you're setting things up. We've been around for 26 years, and I can tell you that not one time in everything we've done in 26 years have we ever sold what we actually operate?
Sure.
Not in one instance. And so there's constant changes, there's constant adjustments, but, to kind of, back to the full service aspect of it, and what you mentioned earlier, Jim, what you mentioned is the proper life cycle of a program, in my opinion. And, we kind of look at it as you come up with a concept, you do the production, which is hopefully involves being able to have some input into the rule structure, communication, then the execution, then you evaluate what happened, then you make adjustments, and you start all over again. So that's what we try to do, and there's going to be changes all along the way. It's when, as you mentioned earlier, when the client thinks that all they want is execution, that's when they end up with less than stellar results, in my opinion.
I mean, if
Well said.
if they're paying attention, then if a guy like Gary is sitting in front of them, then they should listen to what he has to say, because he's the expert. Everybody's got ideas, everybody's got opinions, and unfortunately, or fortunately, we all have access to the internet, which has all this information out there, which creates a lot of questions. Oh, gee, I saw this property online. It looks nice. Oh, well, gee, it is nice. It also has 55 rooms. Your group requires 125 rooms.
Yeah,
Just stuff like that. Those conversations they happen so often it's hard to even keep up.
Mm-hmm. And almost to develop the relationship, it almost feels like today that you have to show them where they had an idea, and you don't show them where it was wrong, but
Right.
you show them where it could be improved on. And
Yep.
over time, they start to realize, hey, I need to listen to, the client does one of these a year or one every other year. We do between 75 and 100 a year. So there's some things that we would be expecting, plus other industries. They know what they know within their industry, and you put it very well earlier. They don't know what they don't know. We have exposure to multiple industries, things like that, and so when they sit there and listen, ultimately their solution, their program, whatever vernacular you want to give to it, performs at a level that they need it to.
Okay, guys, thanks. On fulfillment award, can you think what the difference between a full-service supplier, not just an incentive house, but a full-service travel incentive supplier, and like a travel agent? Can you come up with kind of the difference in your mind between full-service incentive versus just travel fulfillment source?
You want to go first, Wayne, or
You go ahead. I'll jump in.
Okay, so to me, the main difference. So a travel agency, can they book flights? Yes. Can they request a hotel contract? Yes. But it's a very transactional process, in my opinion, and in the experience that I've seen. We have more than once had somebody either call us and say, I have this set up. Actually, one of our largest clients called us out of the blue about 15 years ago and said, I've traveled on one of your programs with somebody else, and we were going to do our own, and we set it up through a travel agency. And thank God, towards the end, they came to us and came clean and said, we can't manage what your expectation is. And we picked up that ball and ran with it. And the difference is not only the transactional side, but the attention to detail, the follow through. And to be honest with you, the way I look at it is a lot of what a full service incentive house provides is insurance. And so much of it is not seen or heard of unless the cockeye hits the fan in a major way. But that's the biggest part of what we're there for at the end of the day, is to make everybody have the best possible time that they can. But we're also there as an insurance policy against major malfunctions. So when flights get canceled, or we had an instance last year, or the year before, we had a riot at one of the events that we were in charge of. And so, how do you deal with that? How do you make sure that people are not only safe, but they stay that way? So there is such a difference between what we provide, which would include the rule structure, the reporting back, every little aspect of it. I mean, the way I look at our business is we own a travel agency within our business. And that travel agency fulfills the transactional side. It's the rest of our business that makes the program really safe.
I mean, I think Gary pretty much summed everything up, really very well in terms of the big differences between, just being a travel agency and what we do. We're not just trying to get Uncle Jim and Aunt Susie to Oshkosh for dinner with Grandma. I mean, that's not what we do. But they're making sure that everybody has an amazing experience and managing that process from before the program even starts all the way through the time they walk in the door when they get home. That's what we do.
Soup to nuts.
That's it.
Gary, you said something I want to expand on just a minute. You talked about insurance. We're insurance. We're the reason we use DMCs. They're insurance for us because the bus will show up. As opposed to maybe we booked one bus in 5 years, and they're booking buses every single day, so the bus will show up.
Right.
There's an actual client that I'm not going to name because they're not my client, but there's an insurance company that was with one of the big houses, and they went, and in 3 years, they got hit by a hurricane, they got hit by tornadoes, and they got hit by a tsunami. 3 years in a row. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of well known in the industry. And the incentive house got everybody off the island when nobody else was moving. The incentive house got everybody to safety when nobody else was moving. And then the incentive house was prepared to bus people across the border and take up all the equipment and make all the arrangements for that to go. Do you think we do a good enough job of explaining in the sales process what a big insurance policy we are?
Oh gosh, my gut says no. Part of my thing is I'm not sure we're always good at telling our story. We get caught up in other aspects of it, and some of these things we don't communicate it in a fashion that they're going to grasp it. And in this instance, like some of what you're describing, until it happens to someone, it's a non-event in their mind. But when it happens and we deliver, we save them in whatever fashion is required, then the light bulb goes on and they know that they have truly done the right thing. But I just think it can be hard to get to that point sometimes without undergoing the tragedy that leads to the efforts to prove your value.
I agree with exactly what Wayne just said. Even when you try to talk about the insurance policy aspect of it, it's hard for somebody to see and to acknowledge if they've not ever experienced anything like that. As Wayne just mentioned, once they do see, then they're all in. They understand what the value is. And over the last 2.5, going on 3 decades for us, we've had those instances happen. So you mentioned that insurance company. Well, the same customer of ours that had the riot, the year before that, they were involved in a hurricane, and so we have one of the strongest relationships in our book of business with that particular customer because they've seen where we have, I don't want to say saved them because that I don't want to be overly dramatic, but we made him feel like everything was going to. So they got the chance to see that, and so they understand the aspect. Especially somebody who's just getting started in putting together incentives, no matter what the delivery mechanism is on the other end, they don't have the breadth to see that. And we can talk about it, and they will acknowledge it, but I don't think they really digest it until something like that happens for the first time.
That's all very true.
Now, when we all started, you could always go into a client and focus on the profit that the program was going to bring. You could provide the correct incentive to achieve that. You know, do you do a domestic trip, a Europe trip, a Mexico all-inclusive? But they looked for us to do that. And then we would always show clients how to generate a positive ROI. Did you all start the same way?
Yeah. That was the 100% goal. You know, in reality, if these programs work the way that they're supposed to, and if there's proper research done up front and the rule structure is set up correctly, an incentive program should never cost anything. It should be 100% free. Now, will it show line items on the P&L? Absolutely. But the incremental growth and the bottom line increases for that organization should more than swallow up any cost for any incentive. If it doesn't, in my opinion, it was not structured properly up front.
Well, you know, and that is all very, very true, but I can tell you for a fact that that doesn't always play out in the real world. And an example is I had a client that we had an incentive program we ran for them every year, and they're out of pocket in terms of what the size of the check they ultimately had to write was $85,000. Now, that $85,000 was because they sold, during the contest period, they sold an additional $25 million in product, $19 million that went straight to the bottom line. So, you know, for me, if I've got $19 million sitting here and you want me to pull $85,000 out of the pile of money and use it to pay for the reward, that's an easy thought. But they ultimately killed the program because they didn't want to spend the $85K. And the $85K, again, was covered by the $19 million that was dropping straight to the bottom line during the promotion period. So,
yeah, I think you and I are saying the same thing in a different way, Wayne, because what you just said shows that incentive program actually did pay for it.
Yep.
They just didn't have the ability, for whatever reason, whether it's political inside the company or whatever, to be able to see that. You know, you and I, and Jim, and everybody on this phone or on this WebEx right now would take that deal every single day of the week.
I'm
in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When do you think the tipping point was that all of a sudden people didn't see ROI as a profit, incentives as a profit, and they started looking at it as a cost item, line item, no matter how you presented it? Can you think of a specific time? And we're going to be American focused here, but can you think of a specific time?
Well, I think, from my perspective, the more procurement got involved in the process, that brought more accountants into the room, and not to disparage accountants, but their role is different in a lot of ways than the role of trying to provide this reward. And so their goal was to hang on to the money as opposed to write the check that funded what allowed everybody to do this. And where they were being short-sighted is, the reality is you would want a successful program is generating a lot of revenue. It's paying for everything that everybody's doing. It's paying for the salaries of all these people that aren't even in a sales role. I mean, that's how it all works. But somebody gets short-sighted and suddenly they see, just as the client I was describing earlier, that $85,000 is an expense that they choose not to bear. They want the 19 million, but they don't want to spend $85K that it costs to get to the 19 million, and that's a big disconnect.
It's huge, absolutely. And I agree that it's when procurement really got involved, but in my mind, it really started to have a major shift during the last recession, when all the TARP money was being tossed around, and you had incentives was a dirty word. If you were going to take a trip, with your top salespeople or your top customers or whatever, it was viewed as evil almost. We had several customers that wanted to continue doing what they were doing, but they completely changed the destinations that they were going to, and in some cases lost serious money on signed contracts with hotels because they wanted to go to a, air quote, lower profile hotel and destination so that they wouldn't be highlighted on the evening news. And so when all that happened in the economy, and procurement really got involved, that's when the tide changed. And you can't just think of it as, well, what we try to tell them to do is don't think of it as a cost center. You have a lot of people that are wanting to all pick up dimes, and that, to me, that's when I saw the biggest shift was back probably in 2007 to 2009.
Yeah, that would have been it. Yeah. Well, and that's, I think probably a pretty good way to look at it. And again, I keep going back to this, but a lot of the issues as an industry we had during that period revolved around the fact, again, that we weren't doing a good job of telling our story, and in this instance, helping them understand that, we let it be portrayed as a boondoggle, if you will, as opposed to a way to generate additional revenue.
Absolutely.
And, if you let it be told that way, then if you don't refute it, then it becomes the truth, unfortunately. And there are those that believed that, it's just a boondoggle. The insurance company or whatever, they're wasting the shareholders' money. There's all this hand-wringing and all this agony over this. And the reality is the shareholders are better served if a program is operated, if it's a good program and it operates properly, everybody wins. And that's the way it needs to work, is everybody needs to walk away with something to show for their effort. And there were those that didn't think anybody should get anything. If that's what you want, but be prepared to accept less.
Right. See, we should be fighting fake news even back then.
Yep. Yep.
Gary, 2 points to back up what you said. We had a client that was over $1 million travel program, and they paid 75% penalties to cancel it because they didn't want to be on the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
Yes,
they had such massive complaints because the program had really worked that they ended up giving away $600,000 in merchandise. So they paid way more than had they just kept a low profile. That was when the world was going crazy because of that TARP money.
Right.
Yeah.
I actually think, fellas, it goes back. I can't think of the name of the guy from GM, but the guy that started the bidding wars among suppliers at GM, and then he went over to Germany. That is to me when purchasing lost their conscience and just started going on price. Because good purchasing directors used to be reasonable and people you could work with. And now it just seems like at the end of the day, it's how much lower can you do it for?
Right. Can you do it cheaper? That's the question of the day.
Yeah. Okay. Folks, again, we welcome your questions. Just go to the chat line feature on your deal. Now we're going to talk about where are we now. The loss of creativity, not telling this story. very seldom in RFPs do you get a chance to program theme. A lot of times you don't get a chance to pick the reward structure. And a lot of times you're asked to focus on a destination, a specific destination, maybe even a specific hotel that you know it's going out to 3 or 4 other people. Where do you guys think we lost not telling the story? Wayne, you mentioned that earlier. You don't think we do a good job at telling our story. Can you expand on that a bit?
Well, I think as with many things, we stand so close to it, and it's so abundantly clear to us, and I think this is human nature. It's so abundantly clear to you that you fail to expand on the idea or verbalize what the real benefit, what the feature, how great it is. Because if you're, let's say you're pitching a destination to a client, if it's one you have an affinity for, and you're sitting there talking with them, in my world, the passion you have for that destination is going to come out in your conversation, and the client, if they're paying attention, hopefully is buying into what you're saying and how you feel about it, because if they have a solid relationship with you and trust what you're doing and how you address their business, then my thinking is that they will then further buy into what you're presenting here, and if you think it's good, then yes, it's good. Now, if you go in talking about a destination or a hotel or whatever that you haven't paid attention to what the client's saying, you could be talking about something that's really not a fit at all, and you're just talking because you like it. Well, just because I like it doesn't mean it's the best fit for the client. But I have to recognize that.
So if it's
your thoughts on creativity loss?
Yeah, if it's a group RFP, so you've got, that there's 6 companies, and they're not really allowing you to have individual conversations with a contact at the client. There's been times when we've just walked away from those because at that point it's just down to what are you going to charge them for a management fee?
Yep.
If that's the case, just ask me what we're going to charge you for the management fee, and we'll give it to you.
Right.
And then we can build your program afterwards, because I don't want to have to worry about is it truly apples to apples that you're looking at, because it rarely is. And we want the ability to tell the story. We're not afraid of competition at all, but I want to be able to walk in with a program thing, with some marketing ideas for a specific destination. If it's just one destination, then you're probably dealing with procurement, and it really boils down to again, like I said, the management fee. So we may put some stuff together, put it on paper, and say, this is what our management fee is. If we get chosen to move to the next level, then we can talk about how to really make this a program that's going to meet your goals. If we're allowed to have conversations and to what I'm told a lot of times what we like to do is the one that we think is going to fit the best for them. We'll wrap our program theme around that. We'll do some marketing around it and put it in front of them. It really depends, in my opinion, on who your audience is within the potential client as to how much you're going to be able to tell the story and how much it's just numbers on a piece of paper.
That's probably very true.
Do either one of you have any particular tricks to try to get to the top of the list when you're in a bid RFP kind of deal like that? Let's say it's a brand new client, it's somebody your sales guys have been calling on for ages. You want a shot, they got you a shot, but now it's not the perfect shot. They just sent out RFPs to 4 people, but your guy got you in. Do you have any tricks to help them try to get to the top of the deck?
Go ahead, Gary.
Yeah, that's a tough one to answer without knowing the specifics of the situation. I mean, you have to analyze every single opportunity, and I mean that's going to be industry specific. I got to be honest with you, this is going to sound horrible to say it this way, but if in the scenario that you just mentioned, I'm going to try to get myself in front of that decision maker so that I can have the conversation similar to what we're having right now. My very first sales job that I ever had, and I didn't even really consider myself a salesperson. I really kind of don't. I still don't now. But I was taught that if you ask too much like you want a piece of business, you're not going to get it. You kind of have to go in there and let them know, look, we have some skills in different areas that we're looking at partnering with you on that we think you can benefit from. And this is going to be a mutually beneficial thing. But if we're out here to really sell you anything. I try to tell my guys, do not be desperate to sell, be eager to serve. And if you can get in front of them and let them know that, and again, boil it down to, hey, if you're looking for a transaction fee or what we're going to charge you, let's just talk about that and be real. And without knowing more details about a specific scenario, that's really all I will say.
I only think that's probably a good way to look at it. And I know from my perspective, I mean, if I'm truly interested, then hopefully there's some sincerity in what I'm saying, and that connects with the individual I'm talking to. But if you can't get to the guy that's ultimately going to make the decision, I say guy, I mean whoever it may be, and you're kind of stuck talking to the procurement manager who's looking to drive it from a different direction. I don't know how you win, and then there are times where I'm not sure I want to win.
Right. It's okay to say no to a piece of business. We both said that already. So I mean,
well, at our age it is. When you're brand new in the business, sometimes those words can't come out of your mouth. But I respect what you're saying, Hy-Vee.
I completely agree. And I've actually used that sitting in a sales presentation with a salesperson from our company. I'll look at the owner or the CEO of who we're talking to and say, look, I have the benefit of not really having to be tied to any one piece of business. So when I'm sitting here talking to you about what we can do for you, there's some honesty and some sincerity behind it. But yes, when you're young and just starting in the business, every piece of business is good. Hopefully you've got, if you're in that position, you've got some leadership in your area that's going to be able to tell you, hey, slow that down, because ultimately it's going to take up your time and keep you from finding a piece of business that is going to be fruitful for you.
Yeah. Chris, that makes the assumption that whoever you're reporting to is enlightened enough to recognize that as a better path.
That's very true. So, fellas, how do we get here? We've all talked about we've lost telling our story. How do we get here?
Well, I think we got here by what we just talked about. We got here by the procurement involvement, the transactional aspect of what it is that people think we do. Many times I think that they view us as a travel agency. We have to be better at letting them know the difference. We have to be better at challenging and being willing to have the tough conversations. And one of those tough conversations, if you have them enough, they're not that difficult. And it boils down to what can be found on the internet. And I personally love it when a potential client is challenging us based on something that they saw online. And then you start putting together, the reality of the situation, and you can see the light bulb start to go off in their head, hopefully, that maybe everything that they saw online was not the entire truth. Or even if it was the entire truth, it was the entire truth for that one seat on the airline that was at a great price, and that you can't put everybody on that airplane. They physically won't fit for that destination. The other lift that's going in is going to get 30 people there after the opening night reception. These things are educational opportunities that I actually enjoy, assuming that you get the opportunity to focus on. the world has now stopped listening to individuals. If you look at the way that social media has changed everything, one person's opinion means nothing. It's 50,000 people's opinion online that has more weight, but those 50,000 people altogether may not have the experience in what we're trying to accomplish. Just taking into account the size of the ballroom, for example, or how big is the outdoor lawn that you're going to try to do a reception on. The internet has gotten us where we are today in life.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. There's so much information out there. I think people are kind of overloaded with information, and but it makes everybody an expert. And if you don't believe it, read Yelp reviews or whatever it may be. And I got to be honest, I don't care what the guy in Minneapolis thinks about a restaurant in San Francisco.
Right.
That's really not, gonna sway me one way or another. We're talking about a hotel or a destination or whatever it may be. It's, we're the people that live and die by it. We're the people that have actually seen it, touched it, tasted it, know what it is in the real world.
Yeah, and to add what you just said, Wayne, about, let's take the restaurant example. Let's say the guy in Minneapolis is right, and that restaurant in San Francisco is amazing. If you and I were going to go have dinner with our wives, we're going to have a fantastic dinner. But when you get 50 people in there, they suck.
Right. There you go. It's not what they do.
That's not what they do. That's not what they specialize in. Even if 50 people will physically fit in there, they don't have the capabilities of getting stuff in and out warm and with the same quality as if we were there just hanging out and we had 3.5 hours for dinner.
Yeah, because
they can't rely on what they see online.
No, because I'm sure we've all experienced clients insisting on it being a certain venue, and against our better judgment, we will do it because they insist, and he ends up being a little disappointed. Oh, well, gee, that wasn't quite as good as what I remember when I came here with my family for dinner that night. Well, gee, no kidding.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, fellas, we have a question from the audience. One of our participants had a client that they had for several years, and they put him into a very nice all-inclusive that has many distant locations. That is one of the top-rated all-inclusives. The client came back in a process of choosing the next year and said they didn't want to use that particular chain anymore. They weren't there to promote that chain's brand. They were there to promote their brand, which I got to tell you, it makes absolutely no sense to me because both brands were great brands. But clearly, some people had gotten in during the year and were looking at selling them a much, much lower level, all-inclusive that would beat the price of this program. When you see that coming, how open are you about what's making the price different and what you just talked about? I don't care you said something yesterday, Gary, about you can make any hotel room like dynamite with pictures, but that's not the reality when you're in there 6 nights. Exactly. So how do you deal with something like that the writer had to deal with?
In that specific situation that you just mentioned, if they're just looking at price, then you've got an issue. But what I would do to try to trump price is to talk to them about the differences in quality, not only in the rooms, not only in the outside venues, not only in the pools, but in that case, a lot of times, because I've had a similar conversation to this in the past, a lot of times I'll focus on the quality of the food. Because at the end of the day, even if you get a price break by going to a different chain, you're still spending a lot of money. These things are not cheap. So is it worth you saving however much it was and risk the people that are traveling on the program having a bad time or getting sick or ultimately it just comes back to, you know what, I wish I hadn't gone. And talk about the different experiences that we've had. And I'm not going to throw out hotel chain names or anything like that. But we all know, if you've been doing this more than 2 or 3 years, you know the differences between the different chains. And you know what some of them are good at and what some of them aren't. But if I was in that situation, and I have been similarly, and ultimately we're going to be a good soldier. We'll take you where you want to go, but you're going to have to sign off on agreeing that I told you up front this is a bad idea. And we had a client about 4 or 5 years ago that I was in his office with one of our sales guys, and I told him I thought something he was getting ready to do, I thought it was a mistake. And he was polite, and he listened, and he told me he appreciated my input, but we were going to do it his way because he was the CEO and it was his company. And it was about a year after that, and after that particular aspect of his program failed miserably, that I was sitting in his conference room again, and he opened the meeting with, we're going to talk about the 1,000-pound elephant in the room. And he looked at me and he said, "You were right, I was wrong, but don't ever tell me that I was wrong again." And we moved.
Whoa. Interesting. Yeah. So, you know, I in a similar vein, I had a client that we were working on the program, and he wanted to meet for breakfast privately one day, and so we met, and what it was about was his words to me were, I was the supplier, my job was to say yes whenever they made a request. And I said, well, I understand what you're saying, but actually, as a supplier, in a sense, my job is to tell you the good and the bad and help you make an informed decision. And if you just want me to implement whatever idea runs through your head, then perhaps we shouldn't be working together. And I got to keep the business. I mean, he wasn't happy with my reply, but he did recognize that there was benefit to knowing the good and the bad of what it was they thought they wanted to do and making their decision based on that versus some idea that just kind of rolled through their head. So,
yeah, that comes with respect and time.
We're running out of time, so I want you to just help me with this. We know the problems that we're all facing. We know that the web is going to start going after our business fiercely with group transfers, group hotel blocks, everything. What can we do in the next year to get the world back into our playing field instead of have to play on everybody else's playing field? And I need to keep this under a couple minutes each, if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Gary.
Well, what I would say is that we need to stay the course. We need to continue to have open conversations. We need to focus on the fact when we're talking to people that people do business with people. At the end of the day, a computer cannot listen to the intricacies of an issue that you're having and fix it. That's going to require a human being, and it's going to require a human being that has experience in doing this, but not just experience. It requires somebody that's got the experience and also has a serving heart and a desire to make things right. This is no different than anything else that's changing in the world right now. But we do have to focus on it. We do have to stay the course, and we do have to vocalize and verbalize the reasons why, the way we do things, we truly and honestly believe that those are the correct way to do them.
You know, I don't want to sound like a broken record here, but I agree with everything Gary said. And it's a matter of paying attention, identifying what their needs are, and acting accordingly in a proper fashion that helps them be successful.
Well, fellas, I can't thank you enough. You've certainly given us a lot to think about. You've answered a lot of questions that people were concerned about, and you clearly have shown why you're so respected within the industry. So I and the board want to thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time we're at an industry event. For all you listeners, the SMART Forum is just a taste of the kind of things you'll get on the SMART Forum, and it's in early June. The dates are on our website, June 6th to 9th. If you're interested in attending, please check on the website and reach out to us, and we'll go through the qualification process. And everybody else, thank you for your time. We know that everybody's busy, and there's nothing more important than all of us sharing our education together. Thanks, everyone, and Wayne and Gary, I can't thank you enough.